Out in the Atlantic Ocean, around 570 kilometers off the coast of West Africa, lies a scattering of 10 volcanic islands most people have never heard of, Cabo Verde. Home to barely 500,000 people, this tiny island nation has no oil, no diamonds, and almost no rain. For much of its history it was poor, isolated, and battered by drought. And yet, in 2026, it did something extraordinary. It reached its first ever World Cup. This is Cabo Verde seen from above. Welcome to Aerial Atlas. Cabo Verde is an archipelago, 10 main islands and a handful of islets split into two groups, the Barlavento or Windward Islands to the north, and the Sotavento, the Leeward Islands, to the south. Together they cover just over 4,000 square kilometers. Every island is volcanic, and on the island of Fogo, the volcano is still very much alive. Pico do Fogo rises to 2,829 meters, and last erupted within living memory, swallowing entire villages under its lava. Swept by dry trade winds off the Sahara, much of Cabo Verde is arid and rugged, a land of black volcanic rock, deep ravines, and wind-blasted coastlines. Unlike almost anywhere else on Earth, these islands had no original inhabitants. When Portuguese navigators arrived in 1456, Cabo Verde was completely uninhabited, empty volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean. They claimed it for Portugal, and in 1462 founded Ribeira Grande, today called Cidade Velha, which became the very first permanent European city in the tropics. Its position, sitting almost exactly halfway between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, would soon make it one of the most important and most painful places in the entire Atlantic world, because that location turned Cabo Verde into a hub of the transatlantic slave trade. For centuries, Cidade Velha was a holding point where enslaved Africans from the mainland were gathered, traded, and shipped onward to the plantations of the Americas. The town grew rich and powerful on that human cargo. It still holds the oldest colonial church in the world, and a stone pillory standing in its square, where enslaved people were once chained and punished. Today, Cidade Velha is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserved not in celebration, but as a place of memory. Cabo Verde remained a Portuguese colony for over 500 years, and they were often brutal centuries. With almost no rain, the islands were struck again and again by catastrophic droughts and famines that, at their worst, killed a large share of the population and forced tens of thousands to flee abroad. The independence movement, led by the brilliant revolutionary thinker Amilcar Cabral, finally won freedom in 1975. But unlike many newly independent nations, Cabo Verde did not collapse into chaos. Instead, it built one of the most stable, peaceful, and best-governed democracies in all of Africa. The country is spread across its islands, each with its own character. Most people live on Santiago, the largest and most African of the islands, home to the bustling capital Praia. Nearby sits Cidade Velha, the old colonial heart. But the cultural soul of the nation beats further north, on the island of São Vicente, and its elegant port city of Mindelo, famous across the Atlantic for its grand carnival, its harbor, and above all, its music. Each island has its own dialect, its own food, its own rhythm. And here is a truly remarkable fact. There are far more Cape Verdeans living abroad than at home. Driven out over generations by drought and hardship, an estimated 1 million people of Cape Verdean descent are now spread across the United States, Portugal, the Netherlands, France, and beyond, roughly twice the population of the islands themselves. Yet they stay deeply connected, sending money, returning home, and keeping the culture alive. Most islanders speak Crioulo, a Cape Verdean Creole born from Portuguese and West African languages, one of the oldest living Creole languages anywhere on Earth. That blend of cultures gave the world something hauntingly beautiful. Morna, slow, soulful and full of longing for home and the sea, Morna is the very sound of Cabo Verde, and its greatest voice was Cesaria Evora, the so-called barefoot diva, who carried her islands to global fame and sang on the world's biggest stages without ever wearing shoes. Morna is now recognized by UNESCO as a treasure of human heritage. Alongside it are the faster, joyful rhythms of Caladera and Funana, the heartbeat of Cabo Verde's street parties and its famous carnival. Cape Verdean food is honest, hearty island cooking. The national dish is cachupa, a slow-cooked stew of corn, beans, cassava, and whatever fish or meat is on hand, simmered for hours, and everyone agrees even better reheated the next morning. Being islands surrounded by rich Atlantic waters, the sea is everywhere on the plate: tuna, lobster, octopus, grilled moray, eel. And to drink, there is grog, a fierce, fiery sugarcane rum distilled in the green valleys of Santo Antão, the spirit at the center of every celebration. So how does a dry, resource-poor archipelago actually survive? 3 lifelines. First, the ocean. Fishing has fed these islands for centuries, and Cabo Verde's mid-Atlantic position once made it a vital stop for ships and submarine cables crossing the ocean. Second, that vast diaspora, sending money home from around the world, remittances that for years kept whole families afloat. And third, increasingly, tourism. The pale beaches and steady winds of Sal and Boa Vista, 2 flat eastern islands famous for their salt flats and sand, now draw hundreds of thousands of European visitors and power the modern economy. For travelers, Cabo Verde is a place of dramatic contrasts. On Sal and Boa Vista, endless white sand and warm turquoise water, with some of the best windsurfing and kitesurfing conditions on the entire planet. On Fogo, you can hike right up to the rim of a live volcano and sleep in a village built inside its crater. On rugged, mountainous Santo Antão, narrow footpaths cling to cliffs above impossibly green terraced valleys. And every year on dark volcanic beaches, loggerhead turtles haul themselves ashore to nest, making Cabo Verde one of the most important turtle nesting sites in the world. Which brings us finally to football. For a country of 500,000 people, with almost no football infrastructure, qualifying for a World Cup should have been impossible. But Cabo Verde's national team, nicknamed the Blue Sharks, had spent years quietly rising, powered in large part by gifted players drawn from that enormous global diaspora. In the African qualifiers, they held their nerve, topping a tough group that included footballing giants like Cameroon, and booked their place at the 2026 World Cup, their first ever. 10 small islands, 500,000 people, swimming onto the biggest stage in world sport. An uninhabited rock in the middle of the ocean, turned into a nation by colonialism, by the slave trade, by drought, and by a people scattered to every corner of the world, yet bound together across all that distance by music, by language, and by these 10 volcanic islands. That was Cabo Verde from above. If you enjoyed the journey, subscribe. Here on Aerial Atlas, we fly over a new country every day.